Hello and welcome to another episode of the BSN podcast. Today is Friday, August 19th. Hope everybody's having a good day so far and had a good rest of their day yesterday. It is in fact Friday, August 19th. Coming off another big night last night. Big night in sports. You had a lot of football. Got a football game on. You had a couple baseball games on. A lot of action in baseball actually, with the Yankees and the Mets both playing last night. Yankees open up a 4-game set against the Blue Jays. The Mets close out their 4-game set against the Braves. Both teams took tough losses. Yankees just get absolutely smoked 9-2. Frankie Montes didn't pitch well. Offense really didn't do much either. So 1 of 10 with runners in scoring position. So even if our pitching did well, and maybe we only let up 3 runs, we still would have lost. So last night was one of those nights in Yankee land where not only did you struggle pitching, but you struggled hitting, and it was just one of those nights where that's gonna result into a 9-2 victory for the Blue Jays. So the Yankees lose the first game of the 4-game set against Toronto. Continued struggles. I was looking at a stat earlier today. It was something like Yankees they haven't had this bad of record over a course of games since or to start a month since April 2016. So it's been so bad that we're going back to 6-7 years ago to find how bad the Yankees are playing. So they continue to struggle, and you thought that grand slam might be able to kind of give them a little bit of a jolt. That's what we all hoped, and it obviously wasn't the case after falling flat last night. So they got to find a way, because now you look at it in your division standings, you're only up 9 games now. Now, it's not like it's a 3.5 game lead or a 2-game lead. You still have separation. You still have some breathing room. But if you continue to lose like this, and let's just say you lose the next 3 or next 2 of the next 3 against Toronto, Toronto might be leaving this series only back 6 or 7 games, and then you kind of wonder, all right, then we got 2 against the Mets. You do head out West Coast and you play the A's and the Angels, but things are really, things are not great right now for the Yankees. And you even look at, the division now. You got to turn things around fast, because they cannot continue to lose games like this. So Yankees lose again tonight, Mets as well. I'm going to get to the Mets in my second topic, though, so I won't go too much in detail now. I'm not going to, this is the only time I'll be really mentioning Yankees much today, because I've talked about the Yankees a lot on this show, so I'm going to talk about the Mets in my second topic today. So with that being said, let's get to the topics for today's podcast. We got Jets versus Falcons, or Jets-Falcons, I should say, joint practice preview. So today and tomorrow, Friday and Saturday, the New York Jets and the Atlanta Falcons at Florham Park, New Jersey, at the great training facility over there for the Jets, will be doing their joint practices. Really looking forward to seeing how these play out. Really looking forward to watching these. He's really looking forward to seeing how, both teams, how do the Jets, certain guys, joint practice is big, because you're going to get an opportunity for the fans there. You'll get an up-close, view of things. For the players, a lot of times, you're going to get to see, some of these guys that have had really good in training camp. You're going to start to see guys separate themselves against other competition. Instead of going up against each other, knowing each other's tendencies, you're going to get a good gauge of how each guy is really doing and how each guy fits, because they're going to be going up against another team, going to be going up against another guy they don't really know their tendencies, don't know much about. So it's going to be good to see. They'll have joint practices the next 2 days, and then on Monday they'll play the preseason game at MetLife. So looking forward to that. We'll get into the preview and all that good stuff. I'll also get to the Mets update. Like I said, not going to do the Yankees today. I've talked a lot about the Yankees, so we're going to do a little bit of the Mets. They struggled this week in Atlanta, and I'm going to tell you why it's not time to be concerned if you're a New York Met fan. I know you might disagree. I know you might be shocked that I'm saying that, but I would tell you, Met fans, it's not time to be concerned just yet if you're the New York Mets. Now, concerning time could be coming soon, depending on how these next couple games go, and I'll tell you why coming up. And then we'll get to the New York sports update. Like I said, Yankees tonight against the Blue Jays, second game of a 4-game set. And the Mets open up a series in Philly, 4 games over the next 3 days. They'll have a game tonight, doubleheader on Saturday, and they'll close out the series on Sunday. So a 4-game set, 3 days with the doubleheader tomorrow. So the Mets going up against a Phillies team that they've taken care of most part this year, basically every time they've played them this year, including the big comeback earlier in the year at Citizens Bank Park. So if they can get back on track against Phillies, go against the Yankees who are struggling, you got DeGrom and Scherzer in that series. That's why I don't think it's time to panic, but I'll really get into it coming up. So with all that being said, a lot to get to today on the podcast. This is the BSN podcast, and let's get into it. Alrighty, so today the New York Jets and the Atlanta Falcons will hold their joint practices at the Jets training facility in Florham Park over the next 2 days, today and tomorrow. Then I believe Sunday will probably just be a day off or just a walkthrough or whatever, and then Monday will obviously be the preseason game at MetLife to kind of close out the weekend of Jets-Falcons joint practices and obviously the preseason. And we see, joint practices going all around. You see, Panthers, Patriots, they've had theirs, ton of fights. So, obviously that's just competitiveness. I would like to see a clean practice today. Practice where you, as a fan, you kind of get to see a lot get done. You get to see a lot of guys, perform. You don't want to just get a hostile practice and not really take anything away from it other than a bunch of guys just throwing haymakers. So, we'll see how it all plays out. I bet you there'll probably be a scrum or two just because that's how football is. It's competitive. We'll see. But Panthers, Patriots have been wild. I mean, the joint practices that the Panthers and Patriots have just been, they've been all over the place. almost every video all over the place is just another fight. There's been like a handful of fights, and they've all been, punches thrown. They're not just like, getting up in each other's face fights. They're like a full-blown punches thrown. So, I'm going to get into the preview and stuff, but the first thing I kind of want to say is, that stuff's going to happen in football, but you really want to see a clean practice so you can take a lot away from it. You don't want to see a practice where guys are just fighting each other and you really can't take away from it, in terms of what players performed well, what players didn't, what players are maybe kind of raised up, maybe, kind of were surprises, what players weren't, all that stuff. So we're going to start with the offense, then go to the defense. We're going to start with the quarterback, obviously. Joe Flacco is going to be getting a lot of first-team reps. He's going to be getting all the first-team reps over the next 2 days. And, you don't have to see a lot from Joe Flacco. He's a veteran. He's been in the league for a very long time. Super Bowl champion, Super Bowl MVP. We all know, what his track record shows all those years in Baltimore and now with the Jets. He started for us, for one game last year. The year prior, he played a couple games as well. Comes back in this year as a mentor. He's a first-team guy. Now with Wilson getting hurt, I think the quarterback would be a bigger story if, it stinks that Zach Wilson goes down, because this was a time in training camp, and this was a time in, in the summer here where we all felt that Zach Wilson, we'd get a really good look at him in joint practices. How is he doing? How is he performing against another defense? That was going to be such a big thing for him. Now you look at it and you say, he's hurt, it stinks, he's missing valuable reps, but you're going to have to see Joe Flacco. So you're going to get a lot of Joe Flacco. First team, how is he looking with Corey Davis, Garrett Wilson, and all that stuff? You hear positive things from Joe Flacco, not only just what he brings as a leadership standpoint in the locker room, but also, just his, he throws receiver-friendly balls where he takes them off, he puts them on. Garrett Wilson saying that in his press conference the other day. So, you don't have to see a ton from Joe Flacco. It's not like we're all going to be dissecting Joe Flacco. He's a veteran. He's been in the league, knows the system. But you just want to see how he kind of does, commands the offense. And, as he gets more and more first-team reps, how does he do going into week one? So Flacco, obviously quarterback, not much else to see. Mike White, Chris Streveler, the other two guys, not a ton to dissect there at the quarterback position. Running back position is big, though, because you look at the running backs and you go ahead and say, you got Breece Hall and Michael Carter obviously going to be the obvious two. And I look at the running back position similar to the way I look at the receiver position, the tight end position, and the D-line as well. We'll get to that in a little bit. There is a lot of depth at the running back position. When you look at guys like Zonovan Knight, Tevin Coleman, Ty Johnson, all these guys really, really, really solid options. Do the Jets go with a veteran in Tevin Coleman as kind of that third back? Do they go with LaMichael Pirine? They like him down kind of as a short yardage third down back. What do they do? Zonovan Knight, undrafted free agent out of North Carolina State. How is he going to, play into this? There's so many there's so many options that the Jets have. Zonovan Knight's a guy that I really look at as a really interesting guy to look at over these next 2 days, and obviously the rest of the training camp and into preseason, because what we saw last Friday in the preseason game against the Eagles was a guy that was really, crafty, was quick, he was fast, he was exciting, elusive, scored a touchdown, all that stuff. He's a guy that the Jets might have found a diamond in the rough as an undrafted free agent. And it's going to be interesting. How do they play it out? Do they go with, they'll probably hold, 3 or 4 running backs? So do you go with Tevin Coleman, Zonovan Knight? Is it Ty Johnson? Is it LaMichael Pirine? What do you do? Zonovan Knight's a guy that I'm really looking at. Obviously, outside of Breece Hall, Michael Carter being the main guys, and you want to see Breece Hall continue to develop as a rookie. Zonovan Knight, though, is a guy that has really surprised a lot of people, has really surprised the fan base in a good way. A guy that I'm looking at over the next 2 days and the rest of the summer, because he is somebody that really could be a solid asset for the Jets if he continues to develop and continue. He's fast. Like, he is exciting to watch. And he's a guy that Jets might have found something. So Zonovan Knight out of the running back rooms, a guy I'm really looking for. And how do they all the other guys too? Do they use Tevin Coleman more in like a special teams? Do they, what do they do? Zonovan Knight's another guy too. He can return kicks. Like, he can do a lot of things for the Jets. He's a guy I'm looking out for, along with Breece Hall, Michael Carter, and the rest of them. Wide receiver, a lot of room there. Garrett Wilson, Corey Davis, Elijah Moore, Berrios, Jeff Smith. All those guys are locks. The other receiver spot is going to be interesting. Is it Denzel Mims? Now, we've seen him work a lot on special teams. How does he get much run over the next 2 days at special teams? He made a nice catch the other day by Joe. I think it was Joe. It was either Joe Flacco or Mike White for a touchdown the other day at practice. The big thing with Mims is, and I've always said this, he got a ton of talent, but just mentally he struggles sometimes, where he kind of gets down on himself. He gets in his own head in a way. Like, he makes a couple good catches, he has a penalty, and then he drops, and he has a drop. Or he has a drop, then he takes a stupid penalty. And he took a lot of those dumb penalties last year. Like, I think it's like the illegal formation or something penalty he took last year. And a lot of times he took it. And it's bad because, when you see a guy get a drop, and then you see him take a penalty, or take a penalty then drop, it's tough because, he's getting in his head. It's almost like he's getting in his own way. He's a guy that is on the bubble, I think. I think he's on the roster bubble because the Jets really like Jeff Smith. They're obviously like the other four receivers that they got in Berrios, Moore, Corey Davis, and obviously the rookies, Garrett Wilson. The big thing is going to be, what do they do? Calvin Jackson's a guy I'm really looking at over these next 2 days because he has had a very good camp. Another guy, no real name, no big name, comes into training camp. Could the Jets have found a diamond in the rough with Calvin Jackson? Really good camp, had a touchdown on the preseason game by a pass by Chris Strevel. It was actually the game winner. He's had a really good camp. How does he look against the Falcons and their secondary? He's a guy to look out for. And it's going to be interesting. Does he get more reps? And, Mims is more on special teams. It's interesting because you hear the coaches say, like, Mims is definitely having a good camp and he's further along. But it's almost like, the way they use him, it's just, I don't know. I don't think the Jets really like Jeff Smith. So, he's going to be a lock. That sixth spot as the receiver is really, really interesting. Is it Kate or is it Jackson? Is it Mims? Who is it? It's going to be interesting. It's really fascinating to see kind of what the Jets do when it comes to that final receiver spot. So those are two guys I'm really looking at. Mims, and also, how do they use them on special teams? Calvin Jackson as well. Or I shouldn't say how do they. How much do they use him on special teams? And then Calvin Jackson as well, being kind of that under-the-radar guy that's put together a really nice camp. Like I said, I was at the Green and White scrimmage, and he was fat. Like, he made a couple nice catches. Like, he had a little bit of an energy boost. Pretty good, Calvin Jackson, for what I saw. So now you go to the tight end rooms, and obviously the obvious, Uzomah and Conklin. And Conklin's been phenomenal throughout camp. Been relied on a lot, especially when Wilson was healthy. Really excited to have two good tight ends. But outside of them, it's going to be interesting to see what the Jets do. Jeremy Rucker, rookie, young guy, still learning a lot. You have a guy like, Trayvon Wesco. What is his future with the team? But a guy that I'm looking at is Lawrence Cager, because he has put together a couple really nice days, led the team receiving in the preseason game last weekend with a big 29-yard catch being his longest for 2 catches for 40 yards. Put together a really, really, really good preseason game and has had a couple really good days at camp. Almost every day you see, whether you're following the Twitter feed or whatever, you see one of the beat reporters say, oh, Lawrence Cager, big catch, or Lawrence Cager's made a great catch. Like, he's been a highlight reel throughout training camp. And Cager's a guy, if you remember, undrafted receiver out of Georgia, and really hasn't done much with the Jets so far. He's been basically on the practice squad. He kind of went into this offseason, with the Jets drafting everybody that they did, all the receiver depth that they have. It's almost like, look, I don't have any way of making this team as a receiver. Puts himself in a tight end spot, bulks up, puts more muscle on, Now he's turned into a tight end, and he's been phenomenal throughout camp. So I'm fascinated to see how much run he gets, and does he maybe get a little bit of run with the ones or the twos instead of always being kind of down with the twos and the threes. How much runs does he get? Because he's a guy that's put together a really good camp. And like I said, this is what's so exciting about joint practices, is you get to see, these guys just constant reps. Because obviously in the preseason games, it's not, you got to, drive, stoppage of play, all that stuff. This is just constant reps, in and out. That's why you get to see a lot of this stuff, which is good. Lawrence Cager is a guy I'm looking at because he's put together a really, really good camp. And could he be a guy, it's happened before, could he be a guy that transforms into a tight end and that's kind of his spot and he finds a role on this team? It's possible. Because you have Jeremy Ruckert, a guy who scored a touchdown, Long Island kid, great story, but he's young and he's still learning a lot. He's still there's a lot of stuff coming his way. Cager's, been in the league now a little bit, been on the practice squad, been winning the team for a little bit. Could you see him get a lot of run this weekend? It's interesting. Definitely a guy to keep your eye out for. And then the offensive line, the main thing I want to see is just George Fant at right tackle and then Dwayne Brown at left. I don't know how much Dwayne Brown will play, if he plays anything. I know he was having position drills yesterday. We'll see how much he plays, if he plays at all. But George Fant and Dwayne Brown are two guys that I'm really looking at, especially Fant, because he's really good at left tackle, had a really good year last year. Right tackle's been his one struggle. So how does he fare in the left tackle at the right tackle spot? And another thing with Flacco, he's a veteran, and we don't have to dissect much, but he is, to see him kind of work with Garrett Wilson a lot more is going to be good to see. See him work with these tight ends a lot more is going to be good to see instead of, sometimes, Uzom and Coughlin sometimes split first team, second team, but just to see him continue to work with the starters, because to be honest, throughout camp, he's been working with the backups in the second team. So see him work more with the starters and all that stuff is also going to be good to see from Flacco. Like I said, we're not going to be sitting here dissecting Flacco's play. He's a veteran. He's going to be the starter week one, most likely, unless if Wilson gets healthy that quick. I don't think he will. That'd be great, but I don't think it happens. So that's my big thing. So that's what I want to see out of the offense. Couple guys there. I think the guy that I'm really looking out for is Lawrence Cager, because it makes the tight end spot really interesting. It's like, then what happens to Kenny Yeboah? What does his future look like? It's when you see guys pop up on the roster like this, offense is going to be good to watch. All right, so now we go to the defensive side of the football, and I got to start with the defensive line because the New York Jets are going to have to make a lot of really tough decisions. Now, you obviously have Carl Lawson, Quinnen Williams, who's dealing with an ankle. Salah said he hopes he can come back within the next couple days or soon, so I don't foresee Quinnen Williams playing much this weekend in joint practices, if any. I don't think he probably will. He's dealing with a little bit of an ankle injury. Will he get in the preseason game? I don't know. To be honest, he's a guy that's put together a phenomenal camp. There's no need to rush him back just for a joint practice or something. So I would assume that he doesn't get much. He doesn't get much playing time, but that'd open up a spot for another guy to step up and prove himself. And the defensive line's got so much talent. Carl Lawson, Quinnen Williams, obviously, he was going to be hurt, right now with the ankle. He'll be fine, though. JFN, Jermaine Johnson. You go to the, other guys like Rankin, Shepard, Tanzel Smart, Jonathan Marshall, Jacob Martin, Zuniga, Michael Clemens, who, where do I even begin on the guy? He's scary, number one. I don't know if you guys saw his press conference yesterday, but, he takes his time to think about each question. He's got, that real deep voice. He's a massive guy. He's scary. He's very scary. He's got long arms, really just tall and long arms. He's a guy that could cause real damage at coming off the edge. So he's a guy to look out for. But the Jets going to have a tough decision to make because I'd assume they probably hold 8 to 10 D linemen, right? So it's probably Carl Lawson, Solomon Thomas, Quinnen Williams, JFM. That's 4. Then what? Do you go Sheldon Rankins, Jermaine Johnson? Obviously, that's 6. So then you got to find 4 more. Bryce Huff, that's 7. He's put together a really good camp. Do you go, Tanzel Smart, 8, Vinny Curry, and then Nathan Shepard? Do you bring in, Zuniga? What happens to, there's so many, there's a lot of really good guys in this D-line. Zuniga has put together a really good camp and had a really good game the other day against the Eagles, or last week against the Eagles. So he's a guy to look out for. And like I said, last weekend, the defensive line had 5 sacks in the preseason game. Clemens had 1, Tanzel Smart had 2, Zuniga had 1, and Quincy Williams had 1. So they had Quincy Williams now is, more linebacker, but they had a really good weekend. 4 of the 5 came of, or a really good game. 4 of the 5 came up against by the defensive line, the sacks. So a lot of pressure, and it's such a talented group. And another thing is, like, the names might not pop out to you. Like Nathan Shepard, Jonathan Marshall. They aren't household names in football. Now, Carl Lawson, Quinnen Williams, JFM, those guys are, more known. Solomon Thomas has been in the league now. Those guys are a little bit more known. But, some of these guys, Jabari Zuniga, he was one of the other 2020 draft class guys that everyone was kind of ready to write off. He's put together a phenomenal training camp. So he's a guy to look out for. There is going to be a lot of really tough. And you wonder if the New York Jets make a trade, or if they trade away one or two of these guys and get something back for them. Because you really wonder that, because a lot of these guys, if they get cut, they're going to get picked up elsewhere very quickly. So you really can't guarantee they're going to clear waivers and you can put them on your practice squad. A lot of these guys, when they get cut, if they get cut, they're going to get picked up. Like I said, the main ones are Carl Lawson, Jermaine Johnson, JFM. I want to see a little bit more out of Jermaine Johnson. I don't want to sound like I'm pushing him a little bit. He's taken a little bit more time to learn and kind of grow than Sauce and Garrett Wilson and all them. But I want to see a little bit more. I want to see him have like a good weekend, because he's kind of been quiet. He's kind of had a quiet camp, but he's been learning a lot. I think, and every guy, it takes a little bit different to latch on to. I think he's taken a little bit longer to grow into the NFL game. I think he's just taken a little bit longer to develop than maybe a Sauce and a Garrett Wilson are. That's fine. Everybody develops, faster. Some guys develop faster. Some guys take a longer time. I think he's taking a little bit of time. I think he's definitely taking a little bit slower than like a Sauce and a Garrett Wilson, or even like Breece Hall and all them. But I want to see like Jermaine Johnson have a good weekend. I want to see it because he's young, got a lot of potential. We drafted him obviously first round, trade up for him. I want to see him have like a really good weekend. Go out, have a good showing. Carl Lawson, Jermaine Johnson, them two, going to be very good for very long. It's going to be exciting. But the defensive line, and it's really fascinating what the Jets are going to do, because Tanzel Smart's had a really good camp. 2 sacks in the preseason game. Jabari Zuniga, out of the middle of nowhere, has just like transformed himself into an absolute threat. He's had a phenomenal camp. You're obviously going to hang on to your rookies like Jermaine Johnson and Michael Clemens, who I'm excited to see again, because Michael Clemens is just, that guy is just fast. He's quick off the line. He's got long arms. He gets to the quarterback. He's a guy that he's a serious play disruptor. Bryce Huff, another guy. So many guys in this roster, or this defensive line, that you're going to have to make a couple tough decisions. And, you really wonder what the Jets do in terms of that. But, do you see do the Jets go more youth at the defensive line and say, hey, we're going to get rid of a guy like a Sheldon Rankins or a guy like a Vinny Curry and keep a guy like a Zuniga and maybe like a Tanzel Smart because they're younger? The Jets cut Tim Ward the other day. He's a guy that played a role on the team last year. Played 11, 12 games, was pretty solid. Has had a good camp. They had to get rid of him because there's so much depth at the position. There really is. So, a lot of guys that you're going to be looking out for. Defensive line is a big focus. It's a big, big focus. Because I think the Jets, a lot of these guys are so close. It might be a play or two by one of these defensive linemen that kind of separates themselves amongst the rest, and that could be the difference between making the team and not making the team. So, it's definitely defensive line is going to be interesting to see, and there's going to be a lot of surprising cuts. There is. Jacob Martin might get cut. He's a guy that we brought in. He's been in the league for a little while. He's a guy that might get cut just because of how much talent there is there. Could you see a Sheldon Rankins, who played a very big role on the team last year at the defensive line spot? Tim Ward did, like I said. He played a role last year. These aren't just random guys. These are guys that have all either had roles in other teams or have played a role last year on the team. So that just shows you how much depth, and it's a good problem to have. I'd rather that than trying to figure out, there's 4 good guys, and we got to pick between like 6 or 8 other guys. I'd rather this than not any depth at all. So, big weekend for the defensive line, definitely. As for the linebackers, and too, since Saleh's a defensive-minded coach, he's going to have a lot of focus on the defensive line, obviously on the defense as a whole, but defensive line's a spot where I'm really going to be looking at a lot. So linebackers, you don't really have to see too much from linebackers other than, Mosley will get some action, didn't, really play preseason, so he'll get some action. Quincy Williams as well, Quan Alexander, other linebackers being, Marcel Harris, Deshaun Phillips, Dean Sherwood, not a ton you have to see out of linebackers. Mosley didn't play preseason, so you could see, him getting some action against another team. Same thing Quincy Williams. Quan Alexander, continuing to see how he fits in with the other linebackers. So there's not a ton you got to see there. The Jets might have to make an interesting cut or two, depending on what they do. Is Phillips the cut? They like Dean and Sherwood a lot. Marcel Harris, it would be interesting to see kind of who fits in there, but the linebacker core, there's not a ton you have to see, other than just, C.J. Mosley getting some more run, seeing how Quan Alexander really fits, again, in-game and against another team. So that's really what you want to see out of the linebackers. Not a ton there. And then for the secondary, you got Will Parks, Riley, Pinnock, Sauce, Eccles, Hall, DJ Reed, who looks like he'll be ready to go. Looks like he'll be ready to go. So, it'll be interesting to see what the Jets do, too, at secondary. It really will. And then you got Whitehead as well back there. Similar to the defensive line, the secondary for the New York Jets, I'm looking at this weekend. By the way, the offensive line, defensive line, back to the guys I'm looking at. Clemens, Zuniga, Tanzel Smart, Shepard, all those guys are, Jermaine Johnson too. All those guys are really guys that you're going to be focusing in on. Those are guys that kind of are on the bubble right now for the roster. Not Clemens. Clemens isn't on the bubble. He's going to be on the team. But Zuniga, Tanzel Smart, those are guys that have had very good camps. But do the Jets see enough in them? It's going to be interesting. Clemens, though, is going to be on this roster. He's had a phenomenal camp. He's young. They drafted him. He's going to be on the team. The other guys, it will be interesting. So, for the secondary, there's a lot of depth there too. Your main guys are going to be Sauce. It's going to be DJ Reed, Bryce Hall, Brandon Eccles, and probably Michael Carter. So then you wonder what happens to Isaiah Dunn. What do they do with Will Parks? Is Elijah Riley have a role? Does Jason Pinnock have a role? The Jets like Pinnock, and they do, and it shows a lot. They like Jason Pinnock. What is his role in the team? You also get to see LaMarcus Joyner, Jordan Whitehead as well. All these guys seeing how they continue to fit within the defense. But, there's a lot of depth at the secondary, and it's a lot of young depth. It's a lot of young guys. Do the Jets opt to go more youth and go kind of with guys like, Michael Carter and all them who are all going to make the team, or do they go with maybe a guy like a Will Parks? Will Parks put together a very good camp. Do the Jets go with him, over Ashton Davis more? Do you see more Will Parks than Ashton Davis? What do the Jets do there? Elijah Riley, how much run does he get? Justin Hardy's a guy there, although they really like him on special teams. So there's going to be a couple tough cuts, too, in the secondary. Because Will Parks, where we picked him up later in the year last year, had a couple really nice games and then really, really good camp. So a lot to look for in the secondary, along with there being your first overall pick, 4th overall in the draft, Sauce Gardner. You want to continue to see him do well. So there's a lot of depth there. Does Will Parks make the team? Does Elijah Riley make the team? What is Jason Pinnock's future? Do they finally cut ties with Ashton Davis? These are all these next couple days. A lot of that's going to be decided over these next couple days with it, with the joint practices. So I'm really looking at a lot of that. And, like I said, just seeing what Sauce has, excited to see what he can do this year. He's a guy to look out for. Defensive line, lots of depth. Secondary, lots of depth. And both of them have a lot of young depth. You look at the defensive line. Tanzel Smart, Jabari Zuniga, Clemens, all these guys. Look at the secondary. Sauce, Eccles, Hall. Now, Sauce isn't really depth, but you look at guys like Eccles. Do they cut ties? What happens to Isaiah Dunn? How much run does he get? So all these guys, secondary is another spot too where, you have a lot of talent, but what do you do with it? Because there's going to be a couple surprising cuts too in the secondary. I mean, Will Parks is a guy that he earned his spot. He got picked up off the street last year, randomly, signed, had a couple, did well for us, and then he's in camp and he's done really well. So do the Jets move on from him and go more youth? Do they keep him? Do they keep Ashton Davis? What is his future? Secondary is fascinating as well. I mean, this Jets team has a lot of really good depth. And like I said, they've all done very well in training. A lot of them have done really well in training camp. This is why the joint practices are so important, because now you're going to see a lot of these guys truly kind of separate themselves amongst the rest. Where You might see, a guy that's kind of on the roster bubble really skyrocketing, and boom, he's in the driver's seat to make a roster. You might see a guy that's on the roster bubble and then not really do great these next 2 days, and now his stock falls a little bit. When you're going up against another team and it's different tendencies, different guys, different defense different defense that the offense is looking at, different offense that the defense is looking at. For all these guys, it's going to be interesting. And I also want to see too, back to the special teams point, because you're obviously going to be Greg Zuerlein and Pinheiro battling it out. You also want to see how do they use Zonovan Knight? Zonovan Knight, Tevin Coleman, Berrios. Does Mims get any run? All that stuff. The Jets have a lot of good really kick returners. Berrios, Zonovan Knight, Tevin Coleman. All of them. Zonovan Knight had a really good run last weekend. Does he continue to kind of show out where he kind of separates himself over LaMichael P. Ryan, over Tevin Coleman, and really kind of separate himself to where he's really looking like that third back on that roster? So all of these things are things to look forward to this weekend. Like I said, today, tomorrow will be the joint practice, with Monday being the preseason game at MetLife. So a lot to look forward to over these next couple days, and a lot to take away too. It's a lot of stuff that you're gonna have to take away and see what the Jets do, because my main thing, what I'm looking at defensively, because I said what I'm looking at offensively, mainly with Lawrence Cager and Zonovan Knight being two guys that I'm really like, let's see how they do. Defensive line, I said, Tanzel Smart, does he continue to dominate? Jabari Zuniga, I want to see Jermaine Johnson a lot. I want to see, Clemens continue to dominate like he did in the preseason game. Secondary, Parks, Riley, Pinnock, how do they do? Those are kind of guys that I guess you can kind of consider a little bit on the roster bubble. I wouldn't say so much Pinnock, but Elijah Riley and Will Parks. Two guys that are kind of, a little bit on the roster bubble in terms of, where they are. Does Will Parks kind of take over Ashton Davis as the second guy in the strong safety spot? All of these things are all questions. So a lot to look forward to over the next couple days, like I mentioned. Hopefully we get a good gauge, and hopefully, like I said, we get a good look at, kind of where this team's at, where these guys are, and all that good stuff. So that's what I got for the Jets and the Falcons joint practice preview. Now we're going to move on to a little bit of baseball. So shifting gears to the New York Mets. Like I said, Yankees I mentioned out in my open. Decided to talk a little about the Mets today just because the Yankees I've talked so much about, and I figured, switch it up a little bit, talk a little bit of Mets. So the New York Mets fell, because I'll tell you this about the Yankees. And I don't want to sound like this is about the Mets, but you know how I feel about the Yankees, right? They've really struggled. It's been frustrating, and it's going to be repeating myself at this point. So figured today I talk about the Mets because they've been really they've kind of struggled a little bit these past couple of days as well. But I'm going to tell you why if you're a Met fan today. So the Mets just dropped. Well, let me just give you kind of the basis. The Mets dropped 3-4 against Atlanta. They now fall to 76-43 on the season, 3.5 game lead on Atlanta. They are 6-4 in their last 10. Lost the game. Atlanta's on fire right now, 9-1 in their last 10, with a 1-game win streak. So we're obviously winning last night as well. So that's they won last night after losing Tuesday. After losing Wednesday, rather, they took care of business last night against DeGrom and the Mets. So, look, the Mets, lose 3-4 against Atlanta. They kind of ran into in a way I look at it as they ran into a buzzsaw. Atlanta's hot. Atlanta's rolling right now. Similar to Atlanta going into Citi Field, they ran into a very hot Met team. They lost 4 or 5. The Mets ran into a very hot Braves team. They are 9-1 in their last 10, and they lost 3-4 to them. Combined, first 2 games, they lost by a combined score 18-1. So, including one of those games being a 13-1 blowout on Monday night. So, the Mets got smoked this weekend. It was tough. They lose Monday, Tuesday. They win Wednesday 9-7. And then they lose on Thursday 3-2 as the bullpen DeGrom was, DeGrom 3 runs, 9 Ks, did what he needed to do. ERA now at 2.31, didn't get much run support as always. Mets only have 6 hits, and the Mets lose 3-2. So Mets lose 3 or 4 against Atlanta. And, as a Met fan today, rightfully so, a lot of Met fans are going to want to panic. They're going to want to panic, and they're going to want to, start to panic and say, oh, this, that, we're losing this and that. Now it's only a 3.5 game lead. I get all that, and I will. And like I said, you know how I am about the Mets. I can be critical of the Mets a lot of times. Same thing with the Yankees. But it's not time, if you're a Met fan, to panic or to be concerned. Now, sure, are there certain parts of this team maybe you should be concerned with a little bit? Like, the bullpen still, maybe the hitting, because, not the hitting so much, but whenever Jacob deGrom takes them out and they just can't hit. They scored 9 runs the night prior. They scored 2 last night. Whenever Jacob deGrom takes them out, it seems like the Mets decide not to hit. So do you want to be concerned about that? Do you want to be concerned about the fact that they just lost 3 or 4? Do you want to be concerned about the bullpen? Those are all things that you could be concerned about. But I would not sit here and say it's time to panic or it's time to be really, really concerned. I understand your lead now was just 6, 7, 8 games. Now it's back down to 3.5. And I understand that you just lost 3 or 4 against Atlanta, a team that just a week ago you won 4 or 5. So you start to wonder, well, has Atlanta kind of figured us out? Or was this just, look, we knew this going into this year. It's going to be a back and forth race till the very end in the NL East. It's going to be. The final 2-3 weeks of the season, it's going to be a very close race. It is. Now, I do truly believe that the Mets are going to eventually break away, but I don't think this is going to turn into a lead where it's going to be the Mets are going to finish out on the division 10.5 game with a 10.5 game lead. Is it 5 games? Is it 4 games? It's possible. I could see it ending with a 5-game lead where the final 2 weeks, the Braves, if they get hot, they can make something happen. This is just, we all knew this going into this year. The Mets weren't just going to run away with the division. The Braves are the defending World Series champions. They have a ton of talent on the roster. They have a lot of really good pitching, a lot of good hitting. They're just a talented team. They won the World Series last year for a reason, right? So you understood that going into this year, it was going to be a battle. It was going to be a fight. You're not just going to run away with the division, have a 15-game lead, and be like, by the final week or 2 of the season, you're just getting ready for the postseason. No, it's going to be a battle. It's going to be back and forth. Mets just were hot. Now the Braves are hot. It's going to be back and forth. It is what it is. That's what happens when 2 of some of the best teams in all of baseball are in the same division battling it out. And that is why I wouldn't be concerned if you're a Met fan. Because the Mets were hot last week. Braves were struggling a little bit. I shouldn't say the Braves were struggling. Mets were hot. The Braves ran into a Met team that was playing their best baseball of the year. Lost 4 or 5. The Mets now ran into a Braves team who I believe came into this series with a 7 or 8 game win streak or something like that. They came into the series very hot, and they took to a 3 or 4. They took 3 or 4. So the Mets were the hotter team going into last weekend, took 4 or 5. Braves were the hotter team going into this matchup during the week, 3 or 4. So it's just sometimes how it rolls. Sometimes it's just what happens. Sometimes you're going to run into a hot team. Sometimes a hot team's going to, a cold team, or you're a hot team and you're going to just dominate everybody else. And the reason I wouldn't concern is because of that. And also, look at the Mets schedule coming up. It's not grueling. Now, right now, I would say it's not time to panic or not time to be overly concerned. Sure, are there parts of this team to be maybe a little bit worried about? Yes, there are. But is it as bad as like the Yankees in terms of their problems? No, it's not. And you're still up in the division. Yes, it's only 3.5 games. But you do have a series coming up against Philly. Now, my big thing is, if you have a 4-game set, it's a doubleheader tomorrow and Saturday. If you lose 3 or 4 against Philly, then maybe there's reason to be a little bit concerned. Because you've beaten Philly all year. The comeback, the winning 2 or 3 last weekend, you've taken care of Philly all season long. You have. You've done what you needed to do against Philly. You've had Philly's number all year long. If you lose 3 or 4 against Philly, and maybe the division all of a sudden becomes tied, then maybe there's reason to be concerned. And you have to realize, if you're the Met fan, look at the Braves' upcoming schedule. You have 3 against Houston starting tonight. That's going to be real tough. Then they have the Pirates, which, they should beat the Pirates. But then they have the Cardinals, which is not easy. Cardinals are a good team. Then you have the Rockies, which is beatable. Then you got the Marlins and the A's, which are good. But then you have the Mariners, who are tough. Giants, who are not, they're not insane. They're definitely beatable, but they're not as, they're all right. They might steal a game. But then they have the Phillies. They do have the Nationals and the Phillies again. Nationals again. Then they play against the Mets, and then they finish out the year with the Marlins. So I look at the Braves schedule right now, much more difficult to close out the year than the Mets. I just read you the Braves schedule, where you have, the Mariners mixed in there. You're going to have the Giants. The Giants are, you do have the A's and the Pirates and stuff and the Marlins. And, every team's going to have those series. But then you have the Cardinals. They still got to play the Cardinals twice this year. You look at the Mets schedule, and this is what I'm saying. Now, if the Mets lose 3 of 4 against Phillies, the reason why I'd be concerned is, well, now you just lost 3 of 4 against the Braves, a team you just took 4 or 5 against. And then you just lost 3 of 4 against the Phillies, a team that you've taken care of business against all year. So that would be a little concerning. But the reason why you shouldn't really panic right now is because, okay, after the Philly series, you have 2 against the Yankees. You're going to have Max Scherzer and Jacob deGrom on the mound. Look, I'm a Yankee fan. Been a Yankee fan my whole life. I would love for the Yankees to beat the Mets twice. I hate the Mets. But I'm just being honest here. Mets will probably beat the Yankees in those 2 games. They probably will. They got the 2 best pitchers on the mound. Yankees can't hit. Yankees are going to roll out Domingo Germán and Frankie Montes, who was awful last night. Let's be real here. If you're a Met fan, you shouldn't be scared of the Yankees right now. I understand Subway Series, anything can happen, but no. You shouldn't be scared. Then you have 4 against the Rockies. Rockies are last in the NL West. Should take care of business there. Now, you do have 3 against the Dodgers after that. That's going to be tough. But look at your schedule after the Dodgers. Nationals, Pirates, Marlins, Cubs, Pirates. Then you have the Brewers, but then you got the A's, Marlins. Then you finish out with the Braves, and then, 3 against the Nationals. The month of September, I mentioned this a couple days ago, the Mets should absolutely dominate the month of September. And I understand it's baseball, anything can happen. But when you look at the Braves' schedule in September, it's a lot more difficult than the Mets. And the Mets have a schedule in September where they can absolutely dominate. I mean, geez, look. Nationals for 3. Pirates for 3. Marlins for 3. Cubs for 3. Pirates for 4. You play the Brewers, but look, you're a good team too. You can take 2 or 3 against Milwaukee. And you got the A's, who are 43 and 76 right now. 33 games below 500, second worst record, I think, in all baseball, only behind the Nationals, who, by the way, you play the Nationals twice and you close out the year against the Nationals. At home. Not that that means a ton, because Nationals is not much of a road advantage anyway in D.C., because not many people go to those games because they've lost 80 games this year. They're 40 games below 500, but still. So, if you're a Met fan today and you're really concerned, relax. Look, I'm not saying that the Mets are, the best team in baseball and that they're, believe me, no, I think the Dodgers are the best team in baseball. And if I had to choose right now who's winning the World Series, I'm telling you it's the Dodgers. I think all around, they're just the best team in baseball. That's my opinion. You could disagree. I think they're the best team in baseball. We'll see. Mets face the Dodgers at the end of August and into September. 3-game set at Citi Field. So we'll see how that plays out. My thing with the Mets, though, is they're still 3.5 games up. And when you look at the schedule in September, I mean, it is your best team that you play is the Brewers. And the Brewers, it's not like you got to play, if you looked at the Mets schedule in September and they had to play like the Dodgers and the Cardinals and, put the Brewers on that list as well. Maybe they had an interleague matchup against like the Astros or the Mariners or something like that. They've already played the Astros twice this year, 4 times this year, two series, one in Houston, one at Citi Field. They lost all 4 of those. If they had to play them or some of those teams, then I would have been like, all right, that's reason to be concerned. But I mean, geez, they play the Pirates, last in the NL Central. They play the Cubs, 3rd in the NL Central, 16 games back, 50-67. Don't let 3rd place fool you there. They play the Marlins, who are 4th in the NL East. Play the Nationals, who are last in the NL East, 36.5 games behind the Mets. Play the Rockies, who are last in the NL West. They play the A's, who are last in the AL West. Look at the Mets schedule in September. It's terrible. It's terrible. The best team they play is the Brewers, And right now, the Brewers are, I like the Brewers a lot. They're a good team, but Brewers are one game of a wild card spot right now. So it's not like you're playing it's not like you're playing the top 5 best teams in baseball. Sure, you do play the Dodgers 3 games, and you do have the Braves mixed in later in September and into October. But I wouldn't panic or be overly concerned if you're a Met fan right now. Sure, you lost 3 or 4. I get that. But I wouldn't be. If I was a Met fan, I would not. Maybe I would be. But just as a non-Met fan, and even as somebody who hates the Mets, I can't stand them. I'm being honest with you. That's how I am on this show. I'm honest. I wouldn't be that concerned right now. And the reason why I said I would be a little bit concerned if you lost 3 of 4 against the Phillies is because you always beat the Phillies. And if you find a way to struggle against the Phillies and struggle against the Braves, and the Braves, make it 1 game, well, then that's a little concerning because it's like, all right, now you're struggling against teams that you should beat. And you're like, all right, is this starting to become a slump? Also, that's just generally 4 games. If you go 2-6 and 8 games, combine that's 8 games. If you go 2-6 in those 8 games, that's not good. So, but look, Braves play the Astros this weekend. That's not an easy win there either. So, I like I said, and to the Met fans out there that are like, oh, it's only 3.5 games. Look, you had to have known this was going to be a battle. I understand when you beat the Braves 4 or 5 at Citi Field, you really felt good about yourself. I get that. But you still have to realize you had 7 more games against the Braves. 4 there, 3 there in Atlanta. So, look, the Mets can make it. The Mets can make this thing happen where if they dominate the month of September, that final series, final 3-game set in Atlanta, very well can mean nothing. Mets might have the division wrapped up by then. But I wouldn't be surprised if they don't. But I wouldn't be concerned right now because when you look at the schedule in September, it's just, and even the schedule to end, look, like I said, the Phillies I like the Phillies a lot, but the Mets have had the Phillies number all year. So no matter, some teams have that, no matter how good you are, some teams just dominate you. I always go back to this, Randall Grichuk, right, on the Blue Jays. He's a guy that, just are kind of a random player, dominated the Yankees all those years. Some teams just have other teams' numbers. Some players just have teams' numbers. So the Mets have done their job all year long against the Phillies. So, the Phillies are a good team. I like them, but it just seems like the Mets just have their number and they just beat them. That's what it really seems like. So, you probably will take care of business against the Phillies. But I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Maybe it is. But I don't think it's reason to. You hear Met fans say, oh, panic. I don't really think it's time to panic. Look at the schedule in September and tell me that you should not feel good about. Tell me that you don't feel good about playing the Pirates, the Marlins, Cubs, a couple of those teams twice. A's. They throw an interleague matchup in there against the A's in September. So I think September is really going to, if they struggle against those teams and they, really aren't playing, then there's reason. But look, you lose 3 or 4. You're going to lose games. The Mets just came off. They were one of the hottest teams in baseball for the past week or two. If the Dodgers were never on that 12-game win streak, Mets would have been the hottest team in all baseball. There's going to be times in the season where you're going to cool down a little bit. And the reason why the Yankees are different because it's been happening for a month. This was just one series. And I get the bullpen and all that stuff. But when you look at, people saying, oh, we're going to lose the division lead, I don't know. And I like the Braves a lot. They're a very good team. But it's just the way things fall. Mets' schedule in September is terrible. It's so easy. And I understand it's all MLB talent and all that. And, but, geez, they play some of these teams in September that are just like, the Pirates, the Cubs, the A's. I don't know. I would not be concerned right now if you're the New York Mets. I wouldn't be. But that's just me. I don't think it's reason to sound the alarms yet. For the Yankees, that's a different story. For the Mets, we're not there yet. So, Mets fall 3 or 4 against the Braves and 3.5 game lead now in the National League East. So, look, as a baseball fan, it does make it more exciting, though. I'm a Yankee fan, obviously. I don't like the Mets, but if that NL East, I would tell you this. If it comes down to that final series of the season against them, where it's like a tie, and it's like the Mets take or whatever, and that's going to be interesting. The Mets even there have an advantage. Let's just say let's just say this. Let's say the Mets are up, 2 games, and they lose 2 or 3 against the Braves in that series that goes into October, that 3-game set. And they're now, it's a tie, and the series is tied or something like that. The Mets would have the advantage there automatically because they then play the Nationals for 3 games. Braves do play the Marlins, but Marlins are really bad. But I'd say the Nationals are probably worse. So maybe both teams play really bad. But if the Mets still have like a 1-game lead there, they should sweep the Nationals, so they have the advantage there. It's not like they got to play like the Dodgers for the final season or final series or something. So I don't know. When you look at the schedule, I don't think it's complete panic time if you're the Mets. Personally, that's just me though. So anyway, let's get to the New York sports update and the rest of baseball to finish off the podcast here today, as well as some football. You got Cubs, Brewers, Orioles, Red Sox, Pirates, Reds, Tigers, Angels, Rays, Royals, Guardians, White Sox, Astros, Braves, Twins, Rangers, Giants, Rockies, Diamondbacks, Cardinals, Mariners, A's, Nationals, Padres, and the Dodgers and the Marlins. So, you got Mets, Phillies tonight, like I just talked about. Mets come into tonight's game 76-43. Phillies come into tonight's game 65-52. This game goes on 7:05 Eastern. I believe you can find it on SNY. Chris Bassett's on the mound for the Mets. He's 10-7 with a 3.27 ERA. And Aaron Nola is on the mound for the Phillies. He's 8-9 with a 3.07 ERA, over under 7.5. Mets, Phillies, I'll tell you what, really good pitching matchups throughout the weekend. So similar to last weekend, that 3-game set. You had DeGrom and Aaron Nola, I think. Mets, Phillies this weekend, it's good pitching matchups, too. You got Bassett tonight against Nola. Tomorrow for Game 1, you'll have David Peterson and Wheeler. That's not phenomenal, but still Wheeler's on the mound. And then you got the second game's not great, but the Sunday game, a good pitching matchup. It's Kyle Gibson versus, I thought it was going to be Taijuan Walker. I guess it's undecided now. But Kyle Gibson takes the mound for the Phillies, and he's a solid arm. Solid arm for the Phillies. So as for the Yankees and Blue Jays tonight, Yankees come into this game 73-46. Blue Jays come into this game 63-54. Blue Jays got Kevin Gausman on the mound. He's 8-9 with a 3.16 ERA, and the Yankees have Jameson Taillon on the mound. He's 11-3 with a 3.95 ERA. Over under set at 7.5 tonight, 7:05 Eastern. This is the exclusive Apple TV Plus game that they do every Friday night. So I always say this about Apple TV Plus: the graphics are great. The announcers are terrible. They are awful. Comment down below if you agree. I don't know if I'm the only one. The graphics are phenomenal. They're great. But the announcers are, even like some of the other stuff they put up, like the hit probability, all that stuff, that's all cool. But the announcers just, they're terrible. They really are bad. And I don't want to be negative, but they're not good in my opinion. So as for football, you got a bunch of games tonight. You got 3 games tonight. You got the Patriots, Panthers, Packers, Saints, and the Rams, Texans. So preseason football rolls on. Giants will play the Bengals Sunday at 7 Eastern at MetLife, NFL Network. Giants are 5.5-point favorites for that game. Not that means much, but preseason week 2 as well this weekend. And then Jets, Falcons, I'll talk about that one on Monday, along with all the joint practice and the recaps and all that stuff. So a big weekend for football. Giants, Bengals Sunday night. MetLife, Jets, Falcons, MetLife Monday. 2 joint practices for the Jets, Falcons this weekend. So preseason football and training camp and all that stuff rolls on as well. As for fantasy baseball, in my main league, I'm currently winning 265-141. In my other league, I'm currently winning 206-91. And I've got nobody pitching in my other league. In my main league, I got Chris Bassett on the mound. So that's that. So fantasy baseball going pretty well. Football leagues are going up as well. Football drafts will be starting soon. What is it, August 19th already? So fantasy football drafts will be starting up soon. Fantasy baseball will be going to the playoffs. That's always a great time for fantasy because you got fantasy football starting and fantasy baseball in the playoffs. It's always a great time for fantasy if you're someone who plays fantasy baseball and football. So anyway, that will do it for the podcast here today. As you all know, I do my In the Trench with Gang Green podcast, so I will have a video up today and tomorrow on that about the joint practices. I'll do a recap for each day, so I'll do that. And then I will also do my Bubs Talking Baseball podcast on Sunday. So I'll be doing podcasts and all that stuff. Gang Green podcast for the Jets, and then the one Bubs Talking Baseball as well. Both those are on Apple Podcasts if you're interested. And then as for this podcast, the All Sports one here on BSN Network, that will do it for me this week. I will see you all back here on the flip side on Monday. So everybody, enjoy your weekend. Enjoy all the sports back on. Enjoy the football. Enjoy the baseball. A lot to look forward to this weekend. And as always, enjoy your weekend. I will see you all back here on Monday. Hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.